Hey guys, it's Jason here. Welcome back to the channel and welcome to the video. Today we get to check out the Losi Promoto MX. Now this bike, guys, has been out now I think for about 8 or 9 months, and I've been kind of on the fence whether or not I was going to get one or not. They looked really cool. I watched a few videos, I got interested, but I always kind of just sort of held back a bit. One, obviously because we've had winter for the last 4 or 5 months here, and you're watching this video Saturday morning. Last Saturday morning is when I ordered it. I had green grass. The only snowbanks that were left were the ones that were actually like from plows and stuff like that. And now it looks like this. We got 6 inches of snow a few days before this thing arrived. So hopefully we're gonna get out at least within the next couple of days. I'm gonna find someplace. I've been looking. My parking lot at work is starting to dry up a little bit. So hopefully we're gonna be able to get this thing out and at least give it its first couple of runs. We even had the baseball fields were all dry. All the snow was gone. So I thought, oh man, this is gonna be awesome. And that's why I jumped on the bike. And then, well, like I said, and like you saw, we got 6 inches of snow one day, and now we're gonna just kind of wait for it to dry. But either way, let's get into that box and let's check out this bike, because everybody talks about all the tech that this bike has. And once you realize actually what is going on with this bike, everybody is right, because there is so much tech, so much hardware and software. It's pretty freaking cool. All right, guys, we've got the Promoto MX out of the box, and my initial thoughts immediately when I got it out was, this thing is friggin' cool, as well as this thing is heavy. Like, it's really heavy. And the neat thing about it is, when I first got the bike, I brought it upstairs to show the kids and my wife and all that stuff. And I had it on the stand, and I had kind of picked up the bike. The best way to say it, guys, is kind of like under here. So I kind of reached in and grabbed it like this. And then that's how I picked it up. And because the weight of this bike is down low, the flywheel, that big 1.2 pound flywheel that sits in there and spins, because it's so low, you would think that by reaching under there and grabbing it from the bottom, it would, seem tippy. That was not the case. It sits very, very firm, very planted on that stand. And it was kind of the first thing I noticed. Now we're going to go into the flywheel as much as I can. So the kind of detail that I can provide. I am not, guys, some super science, physics sort of dude or any of that stuff. I'm not even going to pretend like I am. So I'm not going to get that much into detail. But there are some things that, just from other parts of the hobby, as well as fidget spinners, believe it or not, yes, I just said fidget spinners. And if I can find the one I'm looking for, I'll be able to show you guys what I mean. I can kind of understand what's going on here and why the bike works the way it does. And you've heard so many people, if you've watched any videos of this bike at all, talk about all the tech and everything that's going on. And it is, guys, actually very, very impressive. Losi did a lot. And like I said, you hear about that in every single video, but I'm going to try to do my best to give you sort of the Cole's Notes version on it. And what I mean by that is not kind of drag it on for 15, 20 minutes or anything like that, but just get right into it. So here's kind of a cutout. This is on the bottom of the box. You got 2 motors right here. This is the one that's powering your rear tire, your gears, your sprocket, all that kind of fun stuff. This one here is the one that's spinning that flywheel. So you have 2 motors. You have 2 speed controls to run those 2 motors. You have dual servos, because you have a servo for your steering as well as a servo for your front brake. You have the receiver. So we're going to get more into details, guys, like I mentioned, as this video goes on, but you have a very, very smart receiver. It knows everything about this bike. Now, the best way to refer to it, to me, and if I doubt anybody from Losi is watching this video, but they are, to me, it's kind of like a gyro slash accelerometer, because it knows everything about this bike. It knows when it's like this, it knows when it's like that, it knows when it's leaning, it knows when it's doing a wheelie. So there's a lot going on there with that receiver that lets this bike do a lot of fun things. And the cool thing about it is that because there are the 3 different driving modes, if you don't know, you have an on-road mode, an off-road mode, and a wheelie mode. But then you also have a dial that you're able to kind of adjust. As you get better with the bike, you can kind of allow it a little bit more freedom. And that is something, guys, I'm excited to get into, because I think this is going to be one of those RCs that you go out with and you just enjoy. You take your time. You don't need to do crazy stuff with it. You don't need to take big, huge, massive jumps. Even though I'll be taking jumps, guys, I'll be taking out the KCRC ramp, probably lowering it down to its lowest setting, and, just kind of having some fun with it. I'm not going to do anything crazy, as well as I don't know what I'm going to do, guys, for parts. I sort of fell down the rabbit hole the other night looking at all the companies and all the fun parts you can get for this bike. So I don't know. One half right now is kind of saying, you know what, I'm going to keep it stock and just enjoy it the way it is. The other half just wants to go crazy on it. But either way, guys, let's get back over to the bike. Now, I will be covering all this, guys, when I get out for my first run, but basically with that flywheel on the transmitter, you actually have a separate switch to turn the flywheel on. Now, the reason they did that is if you're doing kind of testing, you're doing some setup and fun stuff like that, you're going to be able to turn the radio on, turn the bike on, check your steering, all that kind of fun stuff. But this is the switch that you've got to turn on when before you actually get to the point of running the bike. So pretty much power up, turn this on, then set it down and do whatever you need to do, because it takes somewhere, from what I've read, guys, around 30 seconds to actually get this flywheel spinning. As well as, guys, when you're actually powering down the bike, you do the same thing. You actually shut the switch off. Then the ESC applies, I guess you can say, almost like a drag brake, and it'll slow it down. From what I've read and from what I watched in the Losi video, if you don't do that, that flywheel will spin for something like 5 minutes by the time it actually stops. So again, kind of a cool tech, guys, going on there. Just wanted to let you guys know that you have that. So this is a DX3. It's just been kind of modified software-wise. Pretty much all the switches are the same. The knobs are the same. Everything is the same except for this wheel that kind of looks more like a motorcycle wheel type thing. But everything else is the same except for what everything does. So you've got, obviously, guys, this here is the big one. This is your MS6S, or MS6X, sorry. And that is your, I want to say AVC, but that's not what it is, because it actually kind of works the opposite in a way that with AVC, the more you dial, usually the more control you get. So you're, instead of it being, super loosey-goosey and you apply a little bit more, you apply a little bit more and it gets more under control. This actually kind of works the opposite in the way that this allows you to do more fun. So this will allow the bike more lean and all that kind of fun stuff. Now, again, I have not driven the bike at this point, so until I get out, guys, and start running it, that's when I'll give you a more accurate idea and tell you guys exactly what it does. I don't want to just kind of spit out what I've read or what I've seen in the Losi videos. Once I get this thing running, we'll go over everything. But I mean, on here, guys, you've got your front brake trim, your steering trim, your front brake travel. Because what is neat about this is that you do have, from what I understand, and again, once we get out, guys, I'm going to be able to go more into details. And I guess once I even power it up, you do have your ESC brake for your rear wheel, but then you have the front disc and a separate servo that runs your front brake. If you didn't have that, when you went to try to stop this thing, it would just slide all over the place and it would be awful. So it's kind of neat that you're going to be able to adjust that front brake to set up the way you want. So if you really want it to be kind of somewhat snappy, obviously not going ass over tea kettle or anything, you're going to be able to do that. That once we get out, once we start running the bike, we'll go over more setup procedures and more of how I'm going to set up the bike. But I do want to cover, guys, just one kind of major thing. And that is, again, guys, when I was referring to that MS6X technology. And I would love to ask the Losi guys, and I don't know if they'd admit it or not, is whether they worked with the Blade team, so their drone team, on this technology, because drones have had technology like this now for years, where they always knew the angles and the banks and all that kind of stuff that the drone was doing. They would limit how much you can turn, how much you can, the pitch and the yaw, all that kind of stuff. They would limit that based on the safe setting. That's what they referred to it as, their safe technology. And I haven't been in drones for a while, but near the end, you could literally even do a backflip with just, I don't know if it was like hitting a button or a certain stick maneuver would even get it to do a backflip, because the technology would apply the power to the motors that it needed to do the backflip. Obviously, that's not the case with this two-wheel motorcycle, but I really do believe that the Losi team probably worked with Blade, because they're all under the Horizon Hobby umbrella, when they were developing the technology for this bike. Because again, every part of this bike is controlled. So from the throttle input, the brake input, when you wheelie, it will stand up the bike, and depending on how much you apply, this knob will determine how much of an actual wheelie you get. So think about that. It actually knows when it's sitting like this, and then it's going to hold the throttle. Technically, it's not holding the throttle, it's going to adjust the throttle to keep you there. And if you decide you want to go a bigger wheelie, you adjust things a bit, it'll know to sit at this angle. That's some pretty cool stuff. And again, when you keep hearing people talk about all this technology, and I know I've repeated that a few times in this video, that's what they're getting at, because it really does know exactly what this bike is doing. I am not going to spend, I was going to, and now guys that I've kind of gone over and I've started been thinking about things, I'm not going to go all over everything that this bike does in this unboxing, because I think it's going to be more fun to go over that stuff and to see it in action. And yes, the snow is starting to slowly melt. I noticed that at my work today that the part of the parking lot is dry, the snow is melted. So I'm, fingers crossed, going to get up there tomorrow. So again, you're watching this on Saturday. Hopefully while you're watching this, I'm actually running the bike. Now, I've got 2 batteries over there. I don't know if you guys can see them. I think you might be able to. This is it's a ready to run, but it doesn't come with the charger and the battery. So the green bike comes with the battery and the charger. The blue and the red ones do not. They come RTR with the transmitter and all that kind of fun stuff, but they do not come with the battery and the charger. And I did kind of, for a couple of minutes, guys, before I started kind of making the video and stuff, I did try the batteries. They do fit, but there is a bit of a hiccup, and it comes with the balance connector. So I'm going to show you guys that in a second, so that if you're thinking about picking up one of these batteries, in one way, I want to say pick up the one that comes with the charger and the battery, because it will make one thing a little bit easier. But at the same time, because it doesn't come with a balance connector, you have to stick with that little USB charger. You'll see it on the screen right now. You have to stick with that little USB charger that takes quite a bit of time to charge the battery. So what we're going to do is we're hopefully, I will change the camera and bring you guys in to see. We're going to Dremel out a little spot and find a way to get the balance connector out. And then also at the same time though, shove that balance connector somewhere where when I start doing wheelies, it's not going to rub back here, because that's what's going to happen back here. The balance connector comes out somewhere around in here. And if I start doing wheelies, it's going to rub on that. So we're going to get into that right now. All right, so I've got everything, guys, positioned up, and I've got the battery in the bike. And it's sort of hard to see, but basically where this balance connector is kind of coming out here, you can see the wires. That was like one solid piece. So it just kind of, there's like plastic all the way around. The only cutout is over here by the actual battery leads. I Dremeled that out, and you can see now I've got my balance connector, because there was no room to shove this in there. I had a really hard time when I first was trying to do it and bring the connector over to this side. I had a really hard time closing this up and getting the body pin in. So what I've done is I just Dremeled out a little bit of material. Now I've got the balance connector. Now, like I was kind of talking about, when you do a wheelie, this thing is going to be kind of hanging back there, and it might start to drag on the ground. So you can sort of tuck it up into here. So what I'm thinking is I'm either going to put like a little, some really thin Velcro on here, and then kind of up in here, so that I can just kind of slide that thing up. And as long as it's just kind of slightly hanging on, it should be fine, just so that it doesn't come down and kind of get in the way and wear off. But I'm going to show you guys a couple of batteries right now that I've tried and I can fit in the bike. And again, the only sort of issue is just the balance connector. The battery that you get with the Promoto MX, the green one, the fully RTR one, it has the IC5 connector on it, and that's how you do all your charging. So all your balancing goes through that one connector. So it's nice that way, but it's kind of a pain in the butt that, like I said, unless you buy one of their upgraded chargers, the one that comes with it is going to take a while to charge. So I'll show you guys the batteries that I have. They do fit, they will work. You just got to do a little bit of work and just kind of give it a little bit of thought about what you're going to do with your balance connector. Now the 2 packs, guys, we're looking at right now, they're Gens Ace 2S packs. Everything that I've looked up and read about the included 85 amp speed control, guys, it is specific to the Promoto MX, and everything I've read just says 2S, 2S, 2S. So I don't think I'll be changing anything out. I have no problem with overvolting a motor and stuff like that. I can kind of do the math and the RPMs and figure out, what's safe. But when it comes to speed controllers, they are specific. If a speed controller says it's 2S, usually it's 2S, and if you try to put 3S in it, it's not going to last long if it even turns on. So we'll be using 2S on the bike. The 2 packs I've got here, this is a Gens Ace Adventure Series 5100C discharge rate. Nice small little hard case pack. I got these for my crawlers and a few other trucks and stuff like that. I've got one of these, but I've got 2 of these guys. So these are their Bashing Series 5200 milliamp 2S. They're only a 35C, but they will be fine in this bike. These are the G-Tech batteries, by the way. And I've got 2 of these ones. So I've got quite a bit of milliamps. worth of runtime with this bike, because I will, when I go out, probably charge up all 3 bikes. One thing I will say, while I was fitting this battery in the bike, watching a video, it looks really simple. Getting this in here, because that's where the connector is, back, it's in there, was a bit of a pain. A couple of interesting words came out of my mouth while I was doing it. Obviously, I will get better at it. I can kind of bring you guys now in. I'll show you what I was meaning when I said I had to Dremel out part of the battery tray. Hopefully it's bright enough for you guys to see, but that right there, that was all solid right there, and I just kind of dropped the Dremel wheel on and just kind of took it down and then cleaned it up a little bit so that I could get my balance connector out. All right, guys, here we go. We're going to fire up the Promoto. So we're going to turn the transmitter on, ESC on. Now you'll see here, we're getting this blinky red light. That's indicating that the flywheel is not turned on. So it kind of gives it a little bit of an alarm beat there, but as soon as we spin up the flywheel, light will go green. Now this will take about 30 seconds. And it's pretty neat to hear this thing spinning up. I don't know why this is, as my son would say, satisfying, but it's sort of satisfying to listen to this thing power up. And every time you think that for a second it almost sounds like it's at the same pitch level, it gets a little bit higher. And even right now, it sort of sounds the same, but then all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, is it going a little bit more? So what I'm gonna probably do, guys, is when I get out there, I'll turn everything on. The bike does have to be stationary when you first power it up and all that kind of fun stuff. So you wanna either have it sitting on a stand, have it sitting on the little kind of block that sort of comes with it as well. This thing here, guys, comes with nails. You can kind of pound it into the ground, or it can even be sitting on its side. You can't be holding it. It needs to start stationary. The bike cannot be moving. But it sounds like now, guys, we've got the flywheel is up spinning. And the one thing I wanted to try, since I've seen this thing, everybody holds it and they talk about, yep, there it is. The weird thing right now, and you guys probably won't get this just looking at it this way, is even though I'm moving it and I can feel the resistance on the bike, what's funny is that as I move it, I don't know if you guys will be able to tell, the bike tips a bit just because of the way it's moving in my hand, but yet it almost kind of stands up on its own, which is weird because it's not on the ground or anything and we're not even rolling, but like you try to tip it and it doesn't tip, if that makes any sense at all. But that is a pretty weird feeling, guys, to have in your hand right now. All right, I've geeked out enough over this. I'm going to shut everything down and get it back on the stand. And then we're going to go over a few more details. But we're going to first shut off the flywheel. And this is the part, guys, I was mentioning earlier on. You want to let that drag brake do its thing. So it's applying a little bit of, I guess, reverse force or brake force to slow down that flywheel, because if you don't, it's going to take you upwards about 4 or 5 minutes for that thing to actually stop spinning. Now you're going to also hear the ESC fan as well. So you've got to kind of, if you were standing here, you got to kind of pay attention to the pitch of the flywheel, and then eventually that's going to go away and then you'll just be hearing the ESC fan. Oh man, that was pretty cool. So the Promoto MX comes with this little bottle of chain lube. Obviously, you just kind of do little drips all around the chain, kind of spin it a little bit, it'll work its way in. Nothing against this, guys, it's gonna do its job, but because it's an oil, and if you've had chainsaws and all that kind of stuff, you know that it makes a mess. You know that a lot of the oil itself will go flying off and all that kind of fun stuff. And that got me thinking, and it got me kind of looking at some of the products I have from CowRC, and I was thinking, what could I use that would provide a better lubrication, kind of keep things from flying off, and just hopefully, guys, be a little bit cleaner as well. And when I was kind of going through everything, I saw the Moose Lick. This is their ultra light grease, and it got me thinking of, oddly enough, a differential. And this is kind of, guys, how my thought process goes. But I was thinking about a differential, and in a differential, we kind of do the opposite. We pull a differential apart, we'll pull out the grease, we'll fill it up with oil, we'll tune the diff that way. But the only reason we can do that is that they're sealed differentials. You can imagine if the diff wasn't sealed and you started using an oil in it, that the oil would eventually make its way out and you would just run out of oil in the diff. But if you think of something like the ring and pinion gear, we never put oil on a ring and pinion. We always use grease because those are not sealed. Yes, they're inside the diff housing, but they're not sealed. So you can imagine the mess, and probably just wouldn't work at all. If you tried to put a little bit of oil, let's say on your ring gear, spin it around. Well, as soon as you start running the truck, you get the higher RPMs, the oil would be gone. If you think of this chain that way, as you apply oil and you start kind of giving it throttle and you start mashing on it, that oil will start working its way out. So what I'm hoping, and this guy isn't proven or anything like that, I haven't seen anything on it yet, but what I'm hoping is that by using this light grease, this is a very thin grease, guys, you can obviously see it just comes out of a little nozzle, is that by applying a little bit to the chain, that it will kind of work its way in. Again, guys, it's a light grease. It'll work its way into the links and the pins and all that kind of stuff, but also then kind of be longer lasting because you shouldn't be, in theory, flinging it off as much. You know, it's not going to go whooshing off the back type thing. So that, guys, is kind of my thought process. That's sort of how my brain works, if you're wondering, is that by putting a nice light coating on here, you're not going to want to sit here and be like, and kind of, you know, soak it or anything like that. I actually, guys, don't even know yet how I'm going to put it on. I'm thinking maybe using like a little piece of cardboard and kind of backing this a little bit and just doing very light sprays. Maybe even get my son to kind of just give it a little bit of throttle so that it's just very slowly spinning and I can kind of spray it on. And that should, guys, it will work because it's a light grease. It's going to work its way into the pins. It's going to work its way into the links, and it will do a very good job. But what I'm hoping is to have kind of less mess, a longer lasting lubrication in theory. Don't get me wrong, guys, you're not going to put this on and then not touch it for a month or anything like that. But that's kind of what I'm thinking I'm going to do. I am going to probably, when I start doing maintenance with the bike, what I'll do is when the chain's off, I'll clean up the chain, maybe even use like a little kind of like a degreaser spray, little toothbrush, clean it all up. And then when it's done, I'll put a little bit of this on, let it sit for at least 24 hours, maybe even 48 hours, and then apply it and get it back on. So again, guys, in theory, what I'm hoping is a longer lasting lubrication. Stay tuned as, guys, I start running this bike and as I, get more and more out with it. I'll let you know how that goes as we start running it in different kind of dirt and dust and sand and all that kind of stuff, how it works for me. But again, guys, in theory, this should be a great product for this chain. Now, before I get into any other details, guys, on the bike, I do recommend check out Losi's page, Losi's YouTube page. They have a huge kind of set of videos on this bike, breaking down everything that's gone into it, all the tech, all that kind of fun stuff, overview of the bike, as well as a lot of maintenance tips for how you're going to take care of the bike, what you're going to do. Now, on that though, what I'm just going to quickly go over is I've already mentioned the dual ESCs, the dual motors, the dual servos, all that kind of fun stuff. I did talk about the receiver and all that kind of stuff, but I just want to kind of quickly now take a minute and just sort of go over what's happening. So obviously you have the brushless motor that's going into a pinion, it's going into a gearbox, which then comes over to a sprocket back here, which connects to your chain. That's what's spinning the tire. Now, when you brake, obviously the ESC is going to apply a little bit of brake, but then the servo itself, that's this cable right here that's connected to the servo, is going to come in here, and that's what actually, guys, clamps down on your brake. Now, when I spin my front tire, you can kind of hear that might just be it sitting in there, or it may need a little bit of adjustment. Again, guys, this is the first time I've got it. I don't have any friends with any of them, so I don't really know if this front tire is just supposed to spin completely freely with no friction at all, or if this is just kind of the norm for the front tire. Obviously, once I do that, the tire doesn't want to spin anymore. So, well, once I get this out, and that's what I've kind of mentioned a few times now in the video, once I get this thing out and I start running it, and if I happen to take a little bit more time and do a little bit more research on the bike, I'll kind of get these few little things dialed in. Now, the one thing though that comes to mind when I look at this is, even though you can adjust the motor and you can change pinions and all that stuff, there's not a whole lot of ventilation going in here, so I can't really see anybody doing any crazy gear changes or anything like that. The only reason I'm saying that is I sort of laughed the other day when I was online, and I was actually on my YouTube page, and because I was thinking about this bike and I was thinking about how it's, different than the usual RCs, the crawlers and the bashers and all that kind of stuff. And I was looking back earlier on in my channel when I was doing work for a company called Rake and Heli. They made carbon fiber kits and all that kind of fun stuff for drones and helicopters. And I actually had a title, and I'll throw a picture right now up on the screen, where 9 years ago, I was still working with companies. I was still, obviously, guys, I was making videos back then. But in the title, you can see right there that I was still changing pinions. I was still upgrading pinions, even on drones. I was always trying to change something. Can I make it faster? So nothing's ever changed. So since 9 years ago when I was doing it with drones and whatever RCs I was running at that time, like ground cars and stuff like that, to this day, I still do it. But when it comes to this bike, because there's not a whole lot of ventilation going on, I don't know if I'll really be changing much when it comes to the stock setup and the stock gear. If I decide to change out the ESC, if I can, once I get this thing apart and I can see what can actually fit in it. I do know Kevin Talbot, he did one of the bigger, not the bigger Castle ESCs, but I think it was the Mamba X, kind of like the crawler ESC I always kind of refer to it as. He did get one to fit in here, so if I make those kind of changes, then maybe I'll change a few things up. But the last thing you want to do is overgear this thing, and you will have temp issues. There's not much movement of air going on here. As you can see with just the way all these pieces are, everything is really, really sealed in here. Because it's kind of crazy to think that this little spot right here, the size of my hand, is, again, 2 motors, 2 ESCs, 2 servos, receiver, gearbox, there's pinion, spur, the sprocket, guys, the shock back up in here, right there, you might be able to see it. There's so much going on in this very small package that it is very impressive. And I haven't even driven it yet. So I'm definitely very pumped to get this thing out. I've been watching it since it came out. I've been watching a lot of the videos, and I was always really excited about it. But like I mentioned, guys, earlier on in the video, with it being winter, it just wasn't the time to buy it. So now that hopefully, fingers crossed, that snow melts and I can get out, even though my first few runs, guys, are just going to be on pavement. They're going to be up at my work. It's the only place right now I can run. Everything else right now is covered in snow, but at least I'll be able to give this thing a test. All right, guys, so as I've been doing all this, I've kind of decided that I want to cut the video a little bit short, because to me, this is more about driving this bike. This is a different experience. I think about things like, in the past, my drones, helicopters, or even boats. They are a completely different experience than driving our usual 4-tire crawler or basher type trucks. This is a different experience. And to go on and just kind of go through every little detail, personally, guys, I think it's kind of pointless. Yeah, you've got these wheels here. Obviously, guys, those are your kind of like your lean bars. You even have sort of a little bit of a bar here that's almost kind of acts like a bit of a sway bar. But I think I could be picking out lots of things, and this video could go on forever, even talking about the shocks, guys. And I'm doing it right now. You can see down here, that's where your travel is. It's usually kind of reversed. But I think it's going to be more fun to kind of, after I've run the bike, go into a little bit of details, go into things that I noticed during that run, versus just kind of doing the usual, hey, here's all the specs, and kind of talking my way through it. Because this thing, guys, is definitely cool, and I'm excited to get it out. So what we're going to do now, guys, is we're just going to end the video. I'm going to go ahead and treat that chain off of camera, get this thing ready, and fingers crossed that it is nice tomorrow, if you're watching this video on the Saturday, so that I can get out and put 2 or 3 packs through this thing, test the off-road mode that basically allows you to kind of throw the bike around a little bit and have a little bit of fun. On-road mode really keeps the bike kind of down on its 2 wheels, makes it, go, obviously, guys, increase faster, your acceleration is faster and all that kind of stuff. And then the third mode, guys, is wheelie mode, which self-explanatory. It allows you to do wheelies. I think there's a lot of setup and kind of trial and error with a bike like this, because especially when you go into something, guys, like the default mode, which is the off-road mode, which, would be a lot of fun when you're running around like baseball fields and spots with kind of like loose dirt and stuff like that, that you're really getting it dialed in, adjusting these sidebars, guys, these side wheels, whatever you want to call them, lean wheels, I don't really know what they call them, but getting those things adjusted, and then getting, guys, your switch, this right here, your MSBX, getting this rate dialed in. I think this is going to be kind of the important part. So between this and the little kind of lean bars, lean wheels, whatever, I still don't know what they're called, getting those things dialed in is where the fun is going to be. And personally, I'm not going to do it in the first run, but I can see these eventually making their all the way up, probably in the first few runs. And then at that point, guys, just driving the bike, learning how to run it, getting comfortable with the acceleration, the speed, all that kind of fun stuff. I actually think that one mode, the on-road mode, I'll never use. It'll all be the off-road mode because I think that kind of allows you the most, I don't know if the proper word would be control, but it'll allow you the most that you can do with the bike. The most unkind of controlled mode, I guess is the better way of saying it. And then obviously, guys, the wheelie mode is just cool because when you want to do a wheelie, you're going to be able to just boop, pop it in and pull the trigger and go for it. So either way go, guys, I hope you enjoyed this kind of slightly different video of the Promoto MX. What I'm going to do now is I am going to treat the chain. I'm going to take this thing out for a couple of pictures. And as always, if you like this video, guys, give me a big thumbs up. Please subscribe and have a great day.